He never said a word. Not when she handed him the coat, not when the sirens howled later, and definitely not when the entire town realized who he actually was. That night changed everything, and it all began with a stranger sitting in the rain, looking more like a ghost than a man. She didn't know his name, didn't care where he came from. All she saw was someone hunched in silence, under a bus stop awning, soaked and still as stone. Something ancient and instinctive stirred in her chest. Help him. So she did. She slipped off her uncle's battered military jacket, the one he'd marched through 2 continents in, and handed it over without a word. Then she turned and left. 1 week later, a military chopper tore through the clouds and landed on the old football field of Marlow Hills High. And the man she assumed she'd never see again stepped out wearing that exact jacket this time, with 4 silver stars gleaming on his shoulders. This is what happens when silent compassion finds someone powerful enough to carry it further. Welcome to our channel, where sparks of kindness ignite blazing stories. Let's unravel what really went down. The rain had no plans of stopping that evening. It wasn't romantic or cinematic, it was miserable. Cold Montana rain with the bite of November sneaking into October's skin. Marlow Hills wasn't much of a town, more like a pause between highways. People didn't lock their doors here mainly because they all knew each other's dogs by name, but they guarded their emotions like dragons hoarding gold. Eden McCoy pulled her wool scarf tighter as she stepped out of the dusty antique shop where she worked afternoons and most weekends. The little brass bell above the door gave a wheeze of a chime before being swallowed by the rain's relentless hiss. She was 23, fresh out of a liberal arts degree she wasn't sure she liked, living with her feisty Aunt Cora in a crooked house with peeling yellow paint and 3 cats. Eden wasn't exactly fearless or loud, but she believed in something her uncle used to say: consistency outlasts chaos. Her boots splashed through an ankle-deep puddle as she headed for the edge of town, where the bus stop leaned sideways like it had given up. The sky was a bruise-colored sheet with no sun, and the maple trees along Waverly Street had lost half their leaves in protest. That's when she spotted him. Slouched beneath the sagging aluminum shelter of the old bus bench, he sat like a forgotten scarecrow, drenched. Still, unmoving. He wasn't shivering. That would have required energy. His coat was draped over him like a weighted blanket. His jeans clung darkly to his knees, and his shoulders curled inward not from cold, but from some invisible anchor dragging him inward. Eden slowed. He looked wrecked, not the kind of tired you get from a double shift or a breakup. No, this man was soul-tired. The kind of tired that makes you forget what hope smells like. The kind that makes even asking for help feel like betrayal. She took a few more cautious steps, then froze. Aunt Cora's voice rang in her memory like a fire alarm. You don't talk to strange men alone, especially not when it's dark, especially not when it's raining, especially not when your gut's unsure. But this wasn't New York or some crime documentary setting. This was Marlow Hills. And somewhere inside Eden, a steady pull whispered, "Don't walk past." Her hand dipped into her coat pocket, fingers brushing against something textured, worn, familiar. The jacket, olive green, soft at the seams, the old patchwork barely clinging on near the collar. It had been her Uncle Reggie's, a medic in the Vietnam War who survived 2 explosions, 3 marriages, and a heart attack during bingo night at the VFW. He used to wear it on cold mornings, while drinking tea out of a coffee mug labeled whiskey. Eden rarely wore it out, but that day had been colder than expected, and she threw it on without thinking. Now it felt heavy, like a decision waiting to be made. She stared at the man again, and something inside her cracked not loudly, but with the deep, dull ache of old timber under weight. She stepped forward, boots echoing lightly under the tin roof. "Excuse me, sir," she said gently, not too close. "Are you all right?" He turned his head slowly, like it took effort to even acknowledge existence. His eyes were sharp, but dulled by exhaustion. "I'm fine," he muttered, voice rough like dry gravel but not unkind. "Just worn." Eden nodded slowly, but she could tell he wasn't fine. Her eyes dropped to her jacket, and before her mind could argue, her hands acted. She shrugged it off in one smooth motion. It was still warm from her skin, still dry, still humming with memory. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "Please, no one should be out here like this." The man blinked, confused. "I can't take that." "It's okay," she said, voice quiet but unshakable. "It's not just a jacket. It belonged to someone who gave even when he didn't have enough to keep. I think. I think he'd want you to have it tonight." The man stared at her for a long beat. Then, slowly, reverently, he reached out with both hands, as though accepting something sacred. He held the jacket a moment, then looked into her eyes deep, steady. "Thank you," he said. Then after a pause, almost like remembering something lost, he added, "That's exactly what Reggie would have done." Eden's breath caught in her throat. "He was my uncle," she said, barely audible. "Reggie Monroe, Sergeant." The man gave a small, knowing nod, not surprised. Then, without another word, he stood, pulled the jacket around himself like armor, and walked away. No bus, no umbrella, no name, just vanished into the mist and the rain. Eden stayed frozen for a moment, then turned and walked home. Her aunt was sitting at the kitchen table folding socks like they were origami. The house smelled like warm gingerbread and peppermint lotion. "Where's your coat, Pumpkin?" Aunt Cora asked casually. Eden hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from her. "I gave it away," she said quietly. "There was a man at the bus stop. He looked so cold, so alone. I didn't know what else to do." Her aunt didn't scold, didn't question, just reached across and gently squeezed her hand. "You did good," she said. "Reggie would have been proud." Later that night, Eden climbed the creaky hallway ladder to the attic and pulled out the dusty photo album. Inside, tucked between yellowed pages, was a black and white photo. Her uncle, in uniform, standing tall in front of a jungle tent, that same jacket on his back, that same calm resilience in his eyes. She lit a small candle, set the photo beside it, and for a long time just sat there in silence. Beside a carefully folded American flag, untouched in its triangular frame for over a decade, she whispered into the quiet, "I gave your jacket away today, Uncle Reggie. I hope, wherever you are, it found its way home. Maybe, just maybe, it found you. And perhaps, in some strange, unseen way, it did." Because sometimes the simplest ACTA jacket handed to a stranger isn't about warmth, it's about remembrance, legacy, love. And on one soft, rain-laced evening in Montana, a man walked away into the mist wrapped in more than fabric. He carried something far heavier, something sacred. The jacket was gone. Yes, but the feeling it left behind, that lingered. Eden McCoy never shared what happened that night with many people. There wasn't really anyone to share it with. Just Aunt Cora and that old black and white photo that now sat quietly under the flicker of a candle by the front window. By Monday, life had snapped back into its usual rhythm. The 8:10 bus. The bookstore shift. Evenings spent helping Aunt Cora with the weekly pill organizers, folding sheets, heating up leftovers, and sighing over half-finished scholarship applications. At night, Eden lay staring up at the ceiling of her childhood room, wondering if her life had already been decided by the zip code printed on her birth certificate. She hadn't expected anything to come from it. Not from the jacket, not from that man, not even from the impulse that made her give something so precious to someone she didn't know. But sometimes the world sees you when you aren't trying to be seen. The bookstore that week was quiet in the way that made the ticking clock sound louder than it had any right to be. Autumn air leaked through the warped wooden windows, making the smell of musty paper and cinnamon tea even sharper. Eden shelved books by genre, wiped down tables no one used, and sipped coffee so weak it tasted like hot disappointment. She didn't speak much unless prompted, but she remembered people, faces, names, preferences. Not because she had to, but because noticing people felt like something Reggie Monroe would have done. On Wednesday morning, Mrs. Langford returned 93, nearly blind, and too proud to admit either. She tottered to the register with a hardcover mystery in her gnarled hands, then suddenly paused mid-reach, her fingers trembling. "Oh dear," she murmured. "I think I left my wallet." On the kitchen counter again. Eden smiled, soft and steady. It's all right, Mrs. Langford. Just pay next time. The old woman peered over her thick bifocals, skeptical. But this is a hardcover. It's also a good story, Eden replied gently, and you shouldn't have to spend another night not knowing who did it. No applause followed. No video clip went viral, but kindness echoes in its own quiet frequency. Friday afternoon, Eden was restocking the paperback table when a man walked in tall, late 40s maybe, dark overcoat, serious expression. He moved like someone used to carrying responsibility and hiding it well. Something about his presence shifted the air in the room, like a string being pulled tight. He didn't browse, didn't nod at the bestsellers. He walked straight to the counter and locked eyes with Eden. You gave someone a jacket, he said plainly. Last week. In the rain. Military green. Vintage. Stitching on the collar. Eden blinked, heart catching on something. Yeah, I did, she answered slowly. It was my uncle's. The man nodded once, expression unreadable. Do you know what generation it came from? The question made her pause. It felt pointed, specific. Vietnam, she said at last. Uncle Reggie Monroe, medic. He served in the 25th Infantry. The man looked at her for a long, heavy moment. Then the corners of his mouth twitched just barely. I see, he said. Thank you. And with that, he turned, walked out the door, and disappeared down the sidewalk. He never gave his name, never explained who he was, never came back. Eden stood behind the counter, frozen, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't explain. Was it a test, a coincidence, or had that old jacket found its way into hands that understood what it truly represented? That night, she told Aunt Cora, the older woman didn't blink. She just stood quietly, then turned to a cabinet Eden had never seen open. She reached into the back and pulled out a plastic-sealed envelope with frayed edges and the kind of yellowing paper that only time can make. This, she said, was with the jacket when your uncle came home. He never said much about the war, but he kept this. Eden peeled the seal open like it might crumble. Inside was a military inventory form. Neat, official, cold. At the bottom, scrawled in fading ink, were the words, issued to Sergeant Reginald Monroe, 25th Infantry Division, 1969. Return not required. Return not required. The line hit Eden like an echo trapped in her chest. Maybe it was never just about that jacket. Maybe it was about letting something live on something her uncle had started long before she was born. The week passed without fanfare. No more strangers showed up. No packages arrived. No phone calls changed her world. But something shifted, quietly. At the grocery store, Eden helped an elderly veteran locate his car keys under a cart. At the library, she gave up her umbrella to a soaked mother trying to shield her toddler. No one clapped. No one posted it online. But little by little, people began to see her, not as the quiet girl from the bookstore, but as something more. One afternoon, as she walked back from the post office, she saw a small group gathered beneath the flagpole in front of Marlow Hills High. She thought it might be a drill until she heard it. A military bugle. Soft, mournful notes played low and slow. Taps. She stopped, hand shielding her eyes from the late afternoon sun. A simple ceremony. One of the older VFW veterans had passed. Eden didn't know him, but she stood anyway, head bowed, still. As the final note vanished into the wind, a woman in uniform turned toward her. You're Eden McCoy, aren't you? Eden nodded, unsure. Yes. My husband told me about you, the woman said. He said, the next generation still remembers. Then she saluted, not sharply, not formally, just enough to make Eden's throat tighten and her knees a little less steady. That night, Eden dug her scholarship forms out from the drawer. She hadn't touched them in weeks. The essays were a mess, the transcripts unsigned, but something inside her was different now. She picked up a pen, took a long breath, and wrote 3 words at the top of the next page. Because he believed. Her uncle, a man who never spoke loudly but left echoes strong enough to last a lifetime. He never asked for applause, never sought recognition. He just kept serving even now, somehow through her. Eden McCoy didn't know what tomorrow held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready for it, ready to face it head on, come what may. Before dawn, a thick fog curled around Marlow Hills, like a whispered secret, blanketing fences, rooftops, and mailboxes, with a hush that felt sacred. By 6:10 a.m., the streets were barely stirring, just the groan of an old milk truck, the flicker of a single porch light, and a mutt trotting across Main Street, like it had business to attend to. Eden had just poured her aunt's coffee when the silence shattered. It began low, a vibration in the window pane, like the pulse of something distant but approaching fast. Then came the unmistakable whoop 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 of helicopter blades slicing through the foggy air. This wasn't the news, not a medevac, and definitely not the weather team. It was military. She stepped out onto the front porch, still wearing slippers, the coffee mug warming her palms, her breath curled white into the morning. And above her, breaking through the mist like something from a dream, came the ghost-gray silhouette of a UH-60 Black Hawk, descending with purpose toward the football field behind the elementary school. It landed like it had done this 100 times before, calculated, quiet, unshakable. Eden sat at the kitchen table, staring at the paper, hands trembling with the weight of something too big, too meaningful to feel real. Across from her, Aunt Cora wiped her eyes, smiling through tears that didn't need words. Aunt Cora pressed a folded tissue to her eyes. "Your Uncle Reggie," she whispered, voice cracking into a smile, "would be grinning so wide right now, he'd crack his dentures." Eden let out a soft, uneven laugh, the kind that only comes when the heart is still catching up with the good it didn't expect. Within a month, Eden had moved into a modest apartment above a florist shop near the center of Marlow Hills. Not far from home, but close enough to the newly renovated Veterans Resource Office, where she'd begun working 3 afternoons a week. Her official title was something comically long: Community Liaison for Civil Military Engagement Initiatives, or something equally bureaucratic. But to Eden, it meant something much simpler: listening, connecting, remembering. She helped organize school trips to the VFW Hall, encouraged local students to write letters to active duty soldiers, and, most importantly, gave veterans a space to share stories long buried in silence. She didn't wear a uniform, but wherever she went, people stood a little straighter, not out of obligation, but respect. Not for what was on her shoulders, but for what she carried quietly in her heart. The jacket never came back to her, and that was more than okay. Because weeks later, she stood inside the Marlow Hills Veterans Hall, facing a glass display case newly installed near the entrance. Inside, the jacket cleaned, pressed, preserved. Above it, a bronze plaque that read, "Kindness is a legacy too." In honor of Sergeant Reginald Monroe, and the niece who reminded us what service still means. Eden didn't cry in that moment. She just rested her hand on the glass, closed her eyes, and stood there for a long time, letting it all settle in, letting him go, while letting him stay. The dedication ceremony was simple: folding chairs, a single mic, a row of solemn faces, most lined by time, all softened by memory. Near the back sat a man in a battered green cap from the Vietnam era. His name was Walter Grady. He hadn't spoken all day, didn't raise a hand, didn't seek attention. But as the crowd began to disperse, he stepped forward. His pace was slow, his posture worn. He tapped the mic twice with a trembling finger. "Name's Walter," he said, his voice like gravel. "First Cavalry, 68 to 70. He looked around the room, eyes dim but clear. "I've seen a lot in my life. Bravery, cruelty, things I still don't talk about, things I probably never will." He paused, then turned toward Eden. "But last month, I saw something else. A girl, just a girl, gave away a jacket like it was the only thing she had. No questions, no camera, just did it." He looked down, gathered himself. "I used to think kindness like that died with our generation." He looked back up. "I was wrong." Silence held the room for a heartbeat. Then someone clapped. Then another, until the hall was filled with the kind of applause that wasn't loud but honest. The kind that doesn't say "good job," it says "we see you now." Eden kept the thank you notes in an old shoebox, letters from middle schoolers, veterans from towns she'd never visited. A mother from 3 states away who'd found the story online and wrote, "You reminded me my dad's service still matters." But there was one letter she kept separate, folded with care, stored inside a manila envelope she'd read more times than she could count. Heavy cardstock, inked by hand. "Oh, Eden, you didn't know it, but that jacket was more than cloth. It was legacy. And the way you gave it without knowing who I was, without asking for any, reminded me what we once fought for. Not for flags, not for medals, but for dignity, humanity, decency. You brought that back. You don't know it, but you kept me standing." General Raymond Cole. She never framed the letter, never posted about it. She tucked it quietly into the back of her desk drawer, beside a paperclip and an old army button that had fallen from her uncle's shirt long ago. Some words weren't meant to be displayed. Some were meant to be carried. On the 1-year anniversary, Eden walked alone to the field where the helicopter had landed. The grass had grown wild again, soft flowers swaying at the fence line. In her hand, the letter, folded once more, faint creases showing where it had been read and reread. She didn't say much, just stood still, looking out toward the horizon where the early fog began to rise just like it had that morning. A soft breeze brushed past her cheek, and for a moment she could almost hear it again, that low, distant hum of rotors cutting the dawn. But more than hearing it, she felt it. That maybe, just maybe, Uncle Reggie had seen it too. That kindness, real kindness, didn't die with those who gave it first. It could be passed forward. Quietly, like a torch in careful hands. And in one soft moment, on one rain-soaked night, with a jacket and an unspoken understanding, Eden McCoy had done exactly that. She folded the letter one more time, slipped it into her coat pocket, and began the walk home. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures live the longest. Sometimes, one jacket can change everything. Even in our darkest hours, kindness finds a way, often in the quietest corners of the world. Not everyone who helps wants the spotlight. Some just want to know that, for one day, someone wasn't left cold. And sometimes that's enough to change a life. You might forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to us, where memory is honored, kindness remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.